Cracks run deep across the ground. Hear a 50-year-old sound. The shadows stretch from Tehran's walls to where Tel Aviv's last light falls. An iron horizon still and vast, trapped between the future and the past.
So you open up the news, and it's all about escalating conflict in the Middle East. Missile strikes, threats of a bigger war. It's a lot. But to really, truly get what's happening today, you've got to look past the headlines. We need to unravel a story that's been building for more than 50 years. And what we're going to do here is connect the dots for you, from a CIA-backed coup in the 1950s all the way to the absolute razor's edge of a regional catastrophe we're seeing today.
All right, here's our game plan. First, we'll dig into the history, the real seeds of all this mistrust. Then we'll unpack the global oil money game, kind of the secret engine behind this whole conflict. After that, we'll look at Iran's modern playbook, how they fight back. Then we'll cover the recent events that literally set the region on fire. And finally, we'll ask the big question, what does this all mean for the rest of us?
All right, first things first, to really get what's happening now, we have to go back, way back. You see, the bad blood between Iran and the West, it wasn't born overnight. It was forged in a few key moments that basically set the stage for everything we see today.
And this timeline, wow, it really lays it all out, doesn't it? Look at this. In 1951, you've got Iran's democratically elected leader, Prime Minister Mossadegh. He does something huge. He nationalizes the country's oil industry. He basically says, hey, Iran's oil should be for Iranians. Well, the US and the UK were not happy about that. So just 2 years later, bam, Operation Ajax. It's a covert coup, they kick him out, and they put their guy, the Shah, back in power. And that single act directly fuels decades of anger that explodes in 1979 with the Islamic Revolution. It's a straight line.
And that quote right there, man, that says it all. You've got to understand, the 1953 coup wasn't just some political maneuver. For Iranians, it was a deep national humiliation. It felt like the US was going around the world talking about democracy, but in their own country, they crushed it just to get their hands on oil. That one event became the origin story for so much of the anti-American anger that has defined Iran ever since.
Okay, so that's the political history, but that's only half the story. To really see the whole board, we've got to talk about money. Specifically, a global financial system that honestly, most people have never even heard of, but it is pulling all the strings behind the scenes of this conflict.
So, back in 1971, the US did something huge. They took the dollar off the gold standard, and everyone was thinking, whoa, what's going to stop its value from tanking? Well, they had a plan, and that plan was oil. They created something called the petrodollar system, which basically made a new rule for the world. If you want to buy oil anywhere on Earth, you have to buy US dollars first. Simple, but absolutely genius.
And here's how that brilliant, or maybe devious, cycle works. Step 1. The US makes a deal with big oil producers like Saudi Arabia to only sell their oil in US dollars. Step 2. That forces every other country in the world to need dollars all the time. Step 3. All those profits, the petrodollars, get recycled right back into the US economy. And Step 4. In return, the US military provides security for those regimes. So if any country tries to break that cycle, say by selling oil in euros or yuan, it's seen as a direct attack on America's economic power. So flash forward to after the '79 revolution. Iran is suddenly on its own, facing the superpower, the United States. They knew they couldn't win a straight-up fight, right? So they got clever. They developed a whole new playbook for fighting from the shadows.
Iran's playbook is basically built on two big ideas. First up is what they call forward defense. Think of it like this. Instead of waiting for a fight at home, they take the fight to their enemies, indirectly, using proxy groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon or the Houthis in Yemen. The second idea is their ultimate insurance policy, a nuclear program. I mean, they saw what happened to guys like Saddam Hussein. They figured the only way to guarantee the US would never try to topple their regime was to have a nuclear weapon.
For a minute there, it really looked like diplomacy was going to work. The 2015 nuclear deal was a huge step. Iran agreed to put the brakes on its nuclear program, and in return, they'd get a break from all these crippling sanctions. But then, 2018 happens. The US just walks away from the deal and slaps on even harsher sanctions. So what did Iran do? Exactly what you'd expect. They hit the accelerator on their nuclear program, enriching uranium all the way up to 60%, which is terrifyingly close to what you need for a bomb.
12 days.
Let that sink in for a second. According to international nuclear watchdogs, that's the estimated breakout time for Iran. That's how long they think it would take for Iran to produce enough weapons-grade uranium for just one, nuclear bomb. The fuse is incredibly, incredibly short. And that brings us right here, right now. All of that history, all of that tension, it's finally boiled over. The simmering shadow war that's been going on for decades, it's not in the shadows anymore. It has exploded out into the open for the whole world to see. So let's just imagine for a second, what does an all-out war even look like? Well, some of the wargaming scenarios out there paint a pretty terrifying picture. Something you could call Operation Epic Fury. And we're not talking about a limited strike here. We're talking about a massive, full-scale attempt to decapitate Iran's leadership, maybe even trying to assassinate the supreme leader himself and his top commanders. And if an attack like that happened, Iran's response would be fast and it would be designed to shock everyone. They wouldn't just aim at military bases. Just listen to this real-world account from someone who was right there during a recent flare-up. One minute you're on vacation in Dubai, the next, the airport is being shut down, and there are drones being shot down over the world's tallest building. It brings the war right into the heart of these massive commercial and tourist hubs, putting millions of civilians right on the front line. This right here, this is the brutal, simple math that explains Iran's entire strategy. It's a war of attrition. Look at the numbers. An Iranian drone costs maybe 20 grand to build. The American Patriot missile you need to shoot it down, that's about $4 million. Iran can churn out 1,000 of these drones a month, while the US and its allies can only make a few hundred of those interceptors a year. You do the math. You just can't win that economic fight long term. Now, don't get me wrong, Israel's air defense is legendary. You've got the Iron Dome, David Sling, the Arrow system. It's a technological marvel. But even the best tech has a weakness, and that weakness is cost, pure and simple. During one big recent attack, it cost Israel an estimated $200 million just to defend its airspace for a single day. That's a huge vulnerability if you're facing a long, sustained assault. Okay, so at this point, you might be thinking, this is all happening thousands of miles away. Why should I care? Well, here's why. This regional fight could wreck the global economy, all because of one tiny strip of water. 20%, that's not a small number. That's how much of the entire world's oil supply has to squeeze through the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow waterway that Iran basically controls. This is, without a doubt, the most important single choke point for energy on the entire planet. So what happens if Iran decides to shut that strait down? Well, it's like a row of dominoes falling, and it hits everybody. Global oil prices would go through the roof. Inflation would spike everywhere. You'd see massive energy shortages across Asia and Europe. But even worse, it would stop that flow of petrodollars back to the US, attacking the very financial system that props up American power. It's basically their economic nuke. And you know who's caught right in the middle? The wealthy Gulf states. They look all-powerful with their skyscrapers and oil money, but they are incredibly vulnerable. These countries import up to 90% of their food through those same sea lanes, and they get over half of their fresh water from desalination plants sitting right on the coast. In a wider war, those are shockingly easy targets. And so here we are, stuck in this terrifying tit-for-tat cycle of revenge, where every attack just demands an even bigger response. It's an old feud, powered by a modern financial system, fought with new kinds of weapons, and it's all teetering on the edge of a choke point that could send the entire world into a crisis. It's this terrifying game of chicken. And the real question isn't if it gets worse anymore. The real question is, who's going to blink first?
Hey everyone, just before we wrap things up, let's take a moment to catch you up on a major development: the rapidly evolving situation between Iran and Israel. The tensions have been heating up, and it's changing the dynamics in real time. I'll break it down for you with some maps and images, so let's dive in. This Encyclopedia Britannica map illustrates the extraordinary geographic scale of the 2026 Iran war, showing how a conflict between two countries rapidly engulfed the entire Middle East. Two colors tell the story. Orange marks the countries directly engaged in fighting, while purple marks the countries that were struck by Iranian missiles and drones, even though they were not the primary combatants. The orange countries are the core fighters. Iran, shown as the large landmass on the right, launched waves of missiles and drones across the region in retaliation for Israeli and American strikes on its nuclear facilities and military infrastructure. Israel, on the far left of the map, was Iran's primary target and struck back alongside the United States. Yemen, shown in orange at the bottom, represents the Houthi movement, Iran's proxy force, which fired missiles northward at Israel and Gulf states. Lebanon, also orange, represents Hezbollah attacking Israel from the north. The small orange diamond symbols scattered across Iraq, Syria, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, UAE, and Oman mark American military bases, explaining precisely why Iran targeted all of those countries. The purple countries, Turkey, Cyprus, Syria, Iraq, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, UAE, and Oman, were not looking for war but became targets simply because they hosted U.S. forces or sat in the path of Iranian strikes. Even neutral nations like Turkey and Oman were caught in the crossfire. Perhaps the most strategically important detail on the entire map is the small label reading, Strait of Hormuz, affected in conflict, tucked between Iran, Oman, and the UAE. That narrow waterway carries approximately 20% of the world's entire oil supply. By threatening to close it, Iran turned a regional military conflict into a direct threat to the global economy. In short, this map tells the story of a war that began as an Iran-Israel confrontation, but rapidly became the most widespread Middle Eastern conflict in modern history, spanning from the Mediterranean Sea all the way to the Arabian Sea, striking over a dozen nations, and shaking the foundations of global energy security. Now we're diving into Iran's military-industrial complex, starting with the nuclear program. When we click the nuclear button, the map fills up with these bright yellow radiation symbols. These mark Iran's most important nuclear facilities. Let me walk you through the key ones. Natanz, this is one of Iran's main uranium enrichment plants, located in central Iran. Fordo, a heavily fortified underground enrichment facility near Qum. Arak, home to a heavy water reactor that has been a major point of international concern. Isfahan, a key nuclear technology and conversion center. Bushehr, Iran's only operational nuclear power plant, right on the Persian Gulf. Parchin, a military site, long suspected of nuclear weapon-related research. Tehran area also has several research reactors and facilities. Sagand, a major uranium mine in the desert. You can see how these sites are spread across the country, from the north near Tehran down to the south near the Gulf. Many of them are deep inland, which makes them harder to reach. This gives you a clear picture of how developed and geographically dispersed Iran's nuclear infrastructure really is. All right, now let's switch over to the military button. Here are some of the major locations that appear. Tabriz in the northwest, Kermanshah and Khorramshahr in the west. Arak again. It shows up in both nuclear and military categories. Isfahan, another dual-purpose site. Shiraz in the south, Semnan and Sharaud in the northeast. These are important for missile testing and development. Hajiabad and Chabahar on the southeastern coast. These sites are where Iran produces missiles, drones, weapons, and other military equipment. Notice how they're spread out strategically, some near borders, some deep inside the country for protection. This map really shows that Iran's military production capability is not concentrated in one place, but distributed across the entire nation. Finally, let's click on the oil infrastructure button. The icons now change to red and white oil symbols, highlighting Iran's most critical energy and oil facilities. The main sites that light up include Abadan, one of the world's largest oil refineries. Bandar Khomeini, a major port and petrochemical complex. Karg Island, Iran's biggest oil export terminal in the Persian Gulf. South Pars Field, the massive shared gas field with Qatar, one of the largest in the world. Bandar Abbas, another key port and refining area. Chabahar on the Gulf of Oman. You can clearly see that most of these vital oil and gas sites are located along the Persian Gulf coast in southern Iran. This is why the Strait of Hormuz is so strategically important. A huge percentage of Iran's oil exports, and the world's oil, passes through this narrow waterway. If these facilities were ever disrupted, it would have massive consequences for global energy markets. So there you have it, a complete breakdown of Iran's nuclear, military, and oil infrastructure. These three sectors form the backbone of Iran's power and economy. Which one surprised you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Guys, look at this footage coming out of Tehran on March 3, 2026. What you're seeing is a massive plume of thick, dark smoke rising high into the sky over the Iranian capital. The video is shot from a rooftop somewhere in the city, showing the urban skyline with people standing on rooftops watching the scene unfold in the distance. This huge black smoke cloud is is the result of U.S.-Israeli strikes on Tehran. The strikes apparently targeted key sites in the capital, and the fire and explosion created this enormous smoke plume that's still billowing up during sunset or early sunrise, giving the whole scene a very dramatic and tense atmosphere. Now we're looking at this interactive map from Encyclopedia Britannica that shows the U.S. military presence in the Middle East as of 2026. Blue stars mark persistent U.S. military bases. These are long-term, heavily established sites where America has continuous operational control. Orange stars show sites with significant U.S. military presence, places where U.S. forces operate or have access, even if not full permanent bases. You can see the heavy concentration in the Gulf area. Bahrain and Qatar are packed with blue stars, especially around the naval support activity in Bahrain and Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. Kuwait has several major bases like Al Jaber, Al Mubarak, and Camp Buehring. The UAE has Al Dhafra Air Base and Jebel Ali. Further out, you'll spot Incirlik in Turkey, bases in Syria, and Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia. Now switch on to the data table. It lists dozens of specific sites with their country and category. You'll see famous ones like Al Udeid Air Base, Qatar; Incirlik Air Base, Turkey; Prince Sultan Air Base, Saudi Arabia; Al-Assad and Erbil in Iraq. This map makes one thing very clear. The United States maintains an extremely strong and widespread military network across the Middle East, especially around the Persian Gulf. These bases play a critical role in regional security, power projection, and any potential conflict involving Iran. This is the shocking aftermath of an Israeli strike that completely destroyed a major building in the Iranian capital. In the background, you can see the heavily damaged multi-story structure still collapsing, sending huge clouds of dust and smoke into the air. On the ground, crowds of people are gathered, watching in disbelief. One man dramatically raises his arm pointing towards the destruction. According to reports, this was no ordinary building. Israeli strikes reportedly hit the location where Iran's Assembly of Experts was expected to meet. Why does this matter? The Assembly of Experts is the powerful body responsible for choosing Iran's next supreme leader. With Ali Khamenei already killed in the conflict, this strike has severely disrupted and delayed Iran's ability to select a new leader, a massive blow to the regime's stability. We're zooming into one of the most critical pieces of geography in the entire Middle East conflict, the Strait of Hormuz. Take a look at this map. Right here in the center, you see the narrow waterway connecting the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman. This tiny choke point is controlled on the north by Iran and on the south by Oman. On the Iranian side, we have key locations like Bandar Abbas, Keshem Island, Kish Island, and Lavan Island. These are not just random dots. They're strategic ports, naval bases, and oil export terminals. On the other side, Fujairah in the UAE, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and further down Muscat in Oman. Notice how close everything is. The entire world's attention is on this narrow strip of water. Why does this matter so much in 2026? Because 20% of the world's oil and a huge amount of liquefied natural gas passes through the Strait of Hormuz every single day. If Iran decides to close it, or if conflict escalates and shipping gets disrupted, global oil prices could explode overnight. Many military analysts believe that controlling or threatening the Strait of Hormuz is Iran's strongest deterrent. It's their nuclear option without actually using nuclear weapons. So as tensions rise in 2026, keep your eyes on this map. Any movement around Bandar Abbas, Fujairah, or the islands could signal that the conflict is about to go from missiles to economic warfare. Look at this surreal moment captured on March 1, 2026, right off Dubai's Jebel Ali port, the largest and busiest container port in the Middle East. A sleek white luxury yacht glides calmly across the water, while a massive black smoke plume erupts behind it from the port. This wasn't an accident. During Iran's retaliatory strikes following attacks on its territory, debris from intercepted missiles caused a fire at one of Jebel Ali's terminals. The UAE government confirmed the blaze started from falling shrapnel, but the image says it all: chaos hitting the heart of Dubai's economy. The symbolism is brutal. Jebel Ali handles millions of containers every year. It's the lifeline for trade, imports, exports, and global supply chains passing through the Gulf. A fire here doesn't just damage infrastructure, it disrupts commerce across the region. And the impact goes far beyond shipping. Dubai's entire economy relies on its image as a safe, luxurious haven. Tourism has taken a massive hit. Hotels are seeing cancellations, visitor numbers are plummeting, and the usual flood of international tourists has dried up amid fears of escalation. This single frame perfectly captures the 2026 conflict's ripple effect. Luxury trying to sail on as usual, while the pillars of Dubai's success, its ports and reputation for stability, are literally smoking in the background. Commerce slowed. Tourism suffered. Confidence shaken. Look at this intense historical footage from August 1953 in the streets of Tehran. A massive crowd of Iranian men is surging down a wide avenue, shouting, waving wooden staves and sticks, mouths open in anger and defiance. This is raw, unfiltered rage. These are protesters reacting to the coup that overthrew Iran's democratically elected prime minister, Mohammad Mossadegh. Mossadegh had nationalized Iran's oil industry, taking control away from British interests. In response, the CIA and British intelligence, MI6, orchestrated Operation Ajax, a covert operation to remove him and bring back the pro-Western Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. The streets exploded with violence. Supporters and opponents clashed, and hundreds died in the fighting. The coup succeeded on August 19, 1953. Mossadegh was arrested, imprisoned, and later placed under house arrest for life. The Shah returned to power, backed by the West. This single moment captures a turning point in Middle East history. Many Iranians saw it as foreign powers stealing their sovereignty over their own oil. The resentment from 1953 fueled decades of anti-Western sentiment and became a rallying cry during the 1979 Islamic Revolution. Today, in 2026, as tensions between Iran, Israel, and the West continue, this event still echoes. Foreign interference, regime change, and street protests, the pattern feels familiar. This map illustrates Iran's axis of resistance, a loose network of militant groups and state-backed forces across the Middle East that receive Iranian support. Highlighted in bright orange are the current members: Iran itself, Iraq with its Iran-backed militias, Yemen controlled by the Houthi movement, and Lebanon where Hezbollah operates along the Israeli border. A lighter shade marks Syria as a former key component of the Axis until December 2024, when Bashar al-Assad's government was toppled. The zoomed-in inset on the left provides greater detail, showing Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad in the Gaza Strip, and the strategic positioning of these groups surrounding Israel. This network functions as Iran's extended reach, enabling it to pressure Israel and Western interests through multiple fronts without direct conventional warfare. From Houthi attacks disrupting Red Sea shipping in the Bab el-Mandeb Strait to Hezbollah's rocket capabilities and Iraqi militias near Baghdad, the Axis creates a web of asymmetric threats that keeps the region on constant alert. Even after the loss of Syria, the remaining orange territories demonstrate how Iran continues to project power across the Middle East in 2026. In this haunting image from Tehran on June 13, 2025, the devastating impact of the ongoing conflict is on full display. First responders in full gear are working urgently amid mountains of rubble and twisted metal, as a bright red fire truck with flashing lights stands ready in the background. A heavily damaged silver sedan sits crushed on the left, while another wrecked car lies on the right, both surrounded by debris from what was once a residential or commercial street. Local residents and onlookers gather nearby, watching the chaotic scene as emergency teams clear the wreckage with long tools under the dimming evening sky. This moment captures the human cost of the June 13 strikes that hit multiple targets across Iran. Buildings stand scarred with broken windows and exposed structures, and the entire street is blanketed in concrete dust and shattered fragments. The image powerfully shows how quickly a bustling city neighborhood can turn into a war zone, with ordinary civilians and dedicated first responders bearing the immediate burden of escalation. Even months later in 2026, scenes like this continue to highlight the heavy toll the Iran-Israel conflict has taken on Iran's urban centers and its people. Look at this intense scene unfolding in the streets of Tehran on January 9, 2026. It's the dead of night, and the whole street is lit up by raging flames. Burning cars and barricades are pouring thick black smoke into the sky while thousands of protesters fill the road, refusing to back down. You can see people standing shoulder to shoulder, some watching the fires, others moving through the chaos as the glow of the flames casts an orange light over everything. This wasn't a small demonstration. Just 2 weeks earlier, mass protests had erupted across Iran, and by January 9, the movement had grown massive. People were out in the streets demanding change, and the Iranian government responded with a violent crackdown. According to Iran's own Ministry of Health, tens of thousands of people were killed in the suppression that followed. The image captures the raw tension of that moment. A silver car parked in the foreground, a huge crowd blocking the intersection, flames devouring vehicles in the background, and the eerie glow of streetlights and fire mixing together. It's a snapshot of a city on the edge, where ordinary citizens risked everything as the regime pushed back hard. Even now in 2026, this night stands as one of the darkest chapters in the escalating unrest inside Iran during the wider conflict.